Chapter 8 of One Third Off. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recorded by Brian Ness. One Third Off by Irvin S. Cobb. Chapter 8. The Friendly Sons of the Boiled Spinach. My friend gave me the names of several men of acknowledged standing, and told me I should be making no mistake did I put myself in the hands of any one on his list. I thanked him, and departed from his presence. To the casual eye I may have seemed going away to be in high spirits, but confidentially I wasn't feeling so very brash. My spirits were low. I had heard the truth. I made no effort to deceive myself there, but the truth was painful. Still, knowing what I should do, I hesitated, temporizing with myself. I gave a couple of days of intensive meditation to the subject, and then I reached this conclusion. I would read a few standard and orthodox works on dietetics, and, so doing, try to arrive at least at a superficial knowledge of the matter. Also, I would balance what one recognized authority said as against what another recognized authority said, and then, before going to a specialist, I would do a little personal experimenting with my diet, and mark the effects. I arrived at this decision privately, taking no one into my confidence, and without an intent to deprive any hard-worked specialist of a prospective fee. I shall ever continue to believe that the second part of the course I chose to follow was a wise one. It might not serve my brother in obesity, but it served me well. I'm sure of that. But the first part of the system naturally came first. This had to do with research work among the best authorities. Here I struck one of the snags that rise in the pathway of the hardy soul who goes adventuring into any given department of the science of medicine and its allied sciences. I was pained to observe how rare it was for two experts, of whatever period, to agree upon a single essential element. An amateur investigator was left at a loss to fathom why such entirely opposite conclusions should have been arrived at by the members of the same school, when presumably both had had the same raw materials to work on. By their raw materials I mean their patience, but so it was. The ancient apostles of dietetics, the original pathfinders into a hitherto untracked field, had disciples who set out to follow in their footsteps, but before they had traveled very far along the alimentary trail, the disciples were quarreling bitterly with the master's deductions and conclusions. Today's school was snooty, touching on the major opinions of yesterday's crowd, and tomorrow's crowd already made faces at today's. On just 2 points I found a unanimity of opinion among what might be termed the middle group of dietetic explorers, as counter-distinguished from the pioneering cult and the modern or comparatively modern. Each one was so absolutely certain that he was so absolutely right, and so absolutely certain that all his contemporaries were so absolutely wrong. At the beginning, it seemed, a reduction of the sufferer's flesh had been attempted by the simple device of bleeding him copiously, not with a monthly statement, as latterly, but with a lancet. Abundant drinking of vinegar also had been recommended as a means to accomplish the desired end. They were noble drinkers in the olden times, but until I began delving into literature of the subject, I did not suspect that there had been any out-and-out vinegar topers. There was citation in an early work of the interesting case of the Marquis of Cortona, a sub-chieftain under the Duke of Alva, and a fine fat old butcher he must have been, too, by all tellings. Finding himself grown so rotund that no longer could he enter with zest into the massacre bees and torture outings which the Spaniards were carrying on in the harried Netherlands, the Marquis had recourse to vinegar. And so efficacious was that treatment that, as the tradition runs, he soon could wrap his loosened skin about him in great slack folds like a cloak, and thus, close reefed, go merrily murdering his way across the Low Countries. One pictures the advantages accruing. In cold weather, now, he might overlap his wrinkles in a clapboarded effect, and save the expense of laying in heavy underwear. True, this might give to the wearer a clinker-built appearance. Still, it would keep him nice and warm, and no doubt he had his armor on outside the rest of his things. But likewise there must have been drawbacks. Suppose now the Marquis were caught out in blowy weather, and the wind worked in under his tucks, and the ratlines pulled loose, and all full rigged and helpless, bellying and billowing and flapping and jibing, he went scudding against his will before the gale. Could he hope to tack and go about before he blew clear over into the next county? I doubt it. And suppose he inflated himself for a party or a reception or something, and a practical joker put a tack in a chair, and he sat down on it and had a blowout. The thought is not a pretty one, yet the thing were possible. From these crude beginnings I worked my way down toward the present day. Dr. Banting of England, the father of latter-day dietetics, from whose name in commemoration of his services to mankind we derive the verb intransitive to bant, had theories wherein his chief contemporaneous German rival, Epstein the Bavarian, radically disagreed with him. Voigt, coming along subsequently, disagreed in important details with both. Among the moderns I discerned where Dr. Woods Hutchinson had his pet ideas and Dr. Wiley had his, diametrically opposed. So it went. There was almost as much disputation here as there is when a federation of women's clubs is holding an annual election. It was all so very confusing to one aiming to do the right thing. One learned savant flatly laid down the ultimatum that the individual seeking to reduce should cut out all pork products, from chitterings clear through the list to head cheese, and give his undivided support to the red meats and the white. One of his brethren was equally positive that I might partake of bacon and even ham in moderation, but urged that I walk around red meat as though it were a pest house. Yet a third, a foe plainly to the butcher, but a well-wisher to the hay and produce dealer if ever one lived, recommended that I should eliminate all meat of whatsoever character or color and stick closely to fodder, roughage, and processed ensilage. I judge he sent his more desperate cases to a livery stable. According to one dictum, bread was all right up to a certain point, and according to another, all wrong. This man here held a brief for beans, especially the succulent baked bean. That man yonder served solemn warning upon me that if perversely I persisted to continue to eat baked beans, the fat globules would form so fast I would have the sensation that a little boy was inside of me somewhere blowing bubbles. The writer didn't exactly say this, but it was the inference I drew from his remarks. Eat dried fruits until your seams give, said Dr. A. Avoid dried fruits as you would the plague, counseled the equally eminent Dr. B. Professor C. considered the drinking of water with meals highly inadvisable, whereas Professor D. said that without adding an extra ounce of weight I might consume water until my fluid content sloshed up and down in me when I walked, and merely by getting a young lady in Oriental costume to stand alongside me I might qualify at a Sunday school entertainment for the entire supporting cast of the familiar tableau entitled Rebecca at the Well. He intimated that just so I stopped short of committing suicide as an inside job, all would be fine and dandy. I do not claim that these were his words. This is the free interpretation of his meaning. Sink the knife in the butter to the very hilt. There will be no ill effects, but only a beneficial outcome, declares such and such a food faddist. Eschew butter by all means, or accept the consequences, clarions an earnest voice. Well, I never was much of a hand for eschewed butter anyway. We keep our own cow and make our own butter, and it seems to slip down just so. In the vegetable kingdom the controversy raged with unabated fury. The boiled prune, blandest and most inoffensive of breakfast dishes, formed the basis of a spirited debate. There were pro-prunists and there were con-prunists. The parsnip had its champions and its antagonists, the carrot its defenders and its assailants. In this quarter was the cabbage heartily endorsed. There was it belittled and made naught of. The sprightly spring onion, already socially scorned in some of the best lay circles, suffered attack at the hands of at least one scientific and scholarly professional. After reading his strictures, I remarked to myself that really there remained but one field of useful popularity for the onion to adorn. In time it might hope to supplant the sunflower as the floral emblem of Kansas, as typifying a great political principle which originated in that state. The initiative, when one took a chance and ate a young onion; the referendum, while one's digestive apparatus wrestled with it; the recall, if it disagreed with one. Alone of all the vegetables